Hey guys, it's the first weekend in June and I'm out here doing some scouting. I'm going to prep a couple spots for this upcoming whitetail season. I want to focus a little bit on this video about things I've seen specifically around standing corn as it pertains to bow hunting in the early season. I've had a number of people over the years. I hunt in a lot of ag country, so not just little fields here and there of ag. I'm talking in multiple states in the Midwest. It seems like that's just kind of the areas I'm around and stuff. So it's corn and soybeans all over the place. Some places, you have some alfalfa mixed in there, even some sugar beets and stuff. But in this area that I'm scouting today, it's corn and soybeans type of situation. That's the rotation we get with the crops. And I love hunting corn in the early season. I've had guys tell me that they're not going to hunt around corn because they believe that deer won't be in the woods, that there's this idea that they're going to be, all the deer are going to be within that corn. In my experience, that is not the case. I think just from personally, maneuvering through corn myself a lot, and just watching deer around corn over the years, I don't think bucks that have some maturity on them, that have, I don't think they love bedding in the corn all the time. Now, obviously, you're going to have situations where bucks are going to be bedded in corn. I'm not saying this is a hard and fast rule, but I'm saying that I think mature bucks, when their antlers get a little bigger, with the way that corn rows are so tight these days, I don't think they can maneuver in there all that well. I don't think that they love being on their feet, but I think they think of it as I know just from scouting and watching them that it's a food source, but I think it's an extra layer of security that they just love. So what I'm out here today to do is to find prep a couple spots that are going to be on I call it a peninsula. It's a finger of timber coming off a river system that jets out into the corn. On bean years, I'm not as attracted to this area as I am on corn years. On corn years, you get this little strip of timber that comes out, and you get situations where bucks just love bedding in there. They bed just on the outside. If they're going to bed in the corn, maybe they bed on the edge of the corn, but I find that they're going to want to bed within thick tree cover within the corn that comes out like that, because they have security all around them. They got food down here. There's a little drainage that runs through the middle of this finger, and they got water down there, so they got everything they need down here in this area. So I'm going to turn the camera around and kind of show you what we're working with. All right, so here is the finger of timber. You get the big woods kind of go all the way back in here, but it runs up into here. So my first order of business, and I've been out here and scouted this before, so I kind of know how this sets up, but I just know it can be really intimidating hunting corn in ag country, because the fields are huge a lot of times, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, what do I do? How do I set up if I'm going to hunt next to corn? And first thing I'm going to do when I come into a situation like this is, like I said, if you've got little fingers like this that are going to come out into a field, that immediately screams at me that I need to get in there and check it out, because that's an area I want to target. So what I'm going to do here is if I was coming in here blind, I would come out either right now, ideally. I mean, you're going to be able to see by just walking the edge of that timber where are the natural areas where deer are going to start coming out. So you can see that at this time of year. So that's what I would do. I'd come in here, I'd walk this edge, I'd see, okay, it's thick all along there. Where are the entrances into the field naturally? And that's a good starting point for you to understand that and think of it as a potential setup here. But in August, what I would also do is I would do a quick scouting trip, similar, just walk it real fast along the edge there when the corn is up and they have been kind of coming out and feeding and things like that, and you'll see the areas that are mowed down. You'll see these, it looks like someone has gone in there and just wiped down swaths of 50 feet of the corn and things like that. Areas where they're congregating. I've seen that in North Dakota where I hunt. I see that in parts of Minnesota where I hunt too. So let's go. I'm gonna go over there, walk along the line there and see where the entrance is, and then see if I can find a spot to set up. So here's a perfect example of what I mean about them bedding just inside, not in the corn, but right on that edge, on the transition, just inside the actual thick tree cover. So right here, you have a bed that is just hollowed out. You got the great protection from the sun. When you've got the corn and everything, you've got, I mean, this is a good bedding area regardless. On a bean year, the deer is going to have a great opportunity to be able to see any type of activity, predators coming from the field side. When corn years, they're going to have that just extra layer of security for them to just disappear into should something bump them off their bed. But this is 10-15 feet into the timber, bed here, trail leads down. This is going to the tip of the finger, but then you got nice rub right here. See this stuff right here rubbed up from last year. So this is what I see a lot in terms of how deer are using this. They're not necessarily bedding right in the vegetation of whether that's I should say the crops. They're not inside the cornfield. They're just off. Things like this where you can see that they're coming in. Yeah, so my point with that is just to say that don't just assume that because something like this is surrounded by corn that all the deer are going to be bedded out in the corn and you're never going to see them. All right, here we go. So I walked along that transition up on the field edge, and as you can see, here's a nice little gap coming up from out of the thick cover leading up into the field. It's just a natural area for them to enter into the corn and get up on the field edge during the evenings and stuff. And if you look, you've got really nice trail. Here's a little rub right there from last year. But look at how it opens up right through here. You've got a nice trail that Gus is kind of coming up on right now. He's on it. Goes back that direction. That's heading towards the tip of the finger, going out into the field where I expect them to be bedding predominantly. It gets real thick out in there, almost like to the point where people have a hard time walking through there. But this is just a natural area for them to come through and funnel out to the field edge. So I had known that from prior seasons. So I actually have prepared that tree right there for me to come in, sneak in through the corn. So there's a fence line over there separating the properties. And I have to walk through the corn about, I don't know, 50-60 yards or something like that. And then can just, instead of when I'm coming in to hunt, I don't want to walk that edge necessarily because, as I showed you on that bed back there, a lot of times you're going to have deer and bucks bedding on kind of right inside that cover, probably looking down into the creek bottom down in this area. So I want to come along that fence line using the cover of the corn to block them block me from their vision, come straight in at this tree, get up right in there. So that's one spot. And I'm also going to get down into this timber a little bit between where it opens up a little bit more and figure out a spot to set up, because I know there are really good trail systems that are just off the creek a little bit that come from that finger. So let's go down there and check that out. All right, so I've gotten inside the timber a little more where it opens up off of that thick cover. This direction is where it comes out to the tip of the finger, where all the really thick security cover is. Right up in there is where that tree I just mentioned is prepped and ready to go, coming from that entrance. But as you can see, like this is the huge main trail leading off that finger. This is super wide, the most well-used trail coming out of that finger. You've got the creek down there, right there. So it's just a nice transition area down in that creek bottom. You've got like deadfall and things like that, which create, a lot of brushy cover that makes it hard to maneuver right on the edge. So this is how they're moving through this piece of timber here. So they're coming down here. And so I got onto this, I followed it down, and I wanted to find, okay, where do things intersect? I don't want to just be necessarily set up right on this trail. I wanted to see, like, can I travel a little ways and see if there's an area where trails intersect. And sure enough, this is it right here. So you can see you've got another little ridge system going up here. So here's the main trail that keeps going up here, but then you've got a nice little trail that runs this edge of the ridge right here. Sorry, I wasn't pointing at the camera, but right up there, comes right down here, and everything meets right here. So I just kind of stop, look around, and say, okay, where can I set up? That tree right there is the tree I'm gonna prep. This is private, so I can do trimming and things like that. If you're hunting public, which I would attack situations like this on public the same way, but you might have to get creative and just figure out a way to do a ground setup or something like that in here to be able to cover this if you can't, if you find situations where you can't get up into a tree and you can't trim like you can on private land. So, but yeah, I'm gonna get this spot prepped and everything. I feel really good about, I just came up along there from where I was before, and there is a trail that leads right through here, but it's so thick and overgrown in there now that it's like prickly ash all over up in that direction. And it's gotten so thick and overgrown that I just, like, I had to almost crawl through at spots. And I just don't feel like a buck is going to want to, you know, go through that hassle up at head level like that to use that all that frequently. So I feel pretty good about the idea that, you know, coming off that finger as he's going to be coming out, he could slip down here, get an easy drink. This is a nice low area for them to go down to the creek and get a drink in the early season if it's hot out. They'll have corn up there to work with. There's oaks in here that around mid-September, end of September, should be dropping acorns and stuff. So I feel pretty good about them using this trail coming off. So I'm going to be ready to climb into that tree and do an early season hunt. And also during the rut phases, like, I'm going to feel good going in here in the morning, getting up here for a morning sit when you'll have thermals rising from that creek bottom as the day gets hotter, and, you know, a buck maneuvering right down this trail, heading back into that tip of that finger to check for does. There's always does coming off that finger. When I've hunted back further that direction, all the time deer are coming off this thing. So it's a pretty versatile spot, something that could do the job in early season as well as, you know, throughout the rut periods and everything. Yeah, so lastly, guys, I just really encourage you to think about corn as something that you can use to your advantage. I know last year, I'll give you an example from North Dakota, where my dad and I went out scouting in August, about 3 weeks before the opener out there. And I had basically a day and a half to do everything I needed to do. And so it was just a total speed mission where I went to the properties I could hunt. It's all ag country pretty much against, you know, bigger and smaller river systems. And I speed scouted everything, walked along the transitions where crop fields met the thick cover. And we looked at the beans, and they were kind of hit. Like, there was, you know, early August, so they should have been feeding on the beans and everything. And they were to an extent, but nothing that really blew me away. So we went to this little property that I had permission on, and I looked, and it was surrounded by corn. And so I just went in, followed that transition along the cover and the corn, and it was just hammered. They were using that more than any of these other little pieces of cover that were surrounded by beans. There was a worn down field or worn down path along the corn right on that transition. There were areas where it was clear they were coming out of the cover and hitting it where the corn had been mowed down more. So if you have that situation and you can set up in one of those areas and get away with it with the wind, that's a good spot to target. But in this situation, I knew, okay, there's a lot of general deer activity going on here. Now it's time to see, like, is a buck using this? So I went back onto a little oxbow. It was really thick back in there, and I figured if there's a buck in here, it should probably be using this as a bedding area. And got back in there, and sure enough, on the tip of that oxbow was a big, worn down bed that was right in the corner, right up against a piece of deadfall that had created some really thick brush to its backside. And yeah, that gave me enough to say on opening weekend, I'm coming out here and this is the spot I'm going to target. So I got the right wind that Saturday. Sure enough, that first night had a 3.5-year-old buck come out with a older buck than that. One of the biggest bucks that I've ever seen in stand. It was you know, a giant by my standards from where I'm hunting and everything like that. And so didn't get a shot at him at that night. So what I did was I moved about 30-40 yards closer to that oxbow where I figured they were bedding. And sure enough, that next evening I had the right wind, a strong wind that allowed me to get in there and prep a new tree about, I don't know, 7-8 feet off the ground. And lo and behold, about 35-40 minutes before last light, here he comes. He's coming out a trail that's 2 yards to my left and gives me a shot. It's that same big buck. So, but that happened because I identified in early August that they're using corn. And so don't shy away from corn. Don't think of corn as something where you're never going to see deer because they're all bedding out there. In my experience, that is not the case. They're going to use it as just an extra security blanket, and it can be dynamite in the early season.